For years, Earth lived under a calm sky. People went to work, children went to school, and the world felt safe again. The last great scare, an alien encounter that almost turned into a war, had faded into distant memory. Governments told everyone that peace had been secured, that the danger was over. Most believed them. After all, people wanted peace more than they wanted truth. When the alien fleets first appeared years ago, humanity came close to losing everything. The battle had been avoided not through strength but through negotiation. A fragile treaty had been signed, allowing humans to return to their blue planet while the war between other civilizations continued light years away. Earth promised to stay out of interstellar affairs, to never interfere or send weapons beyond the solar system again. It was a deal made out of fear but dressed up as wisdom. At first, people celebrated the silence that followed. The stars looked peaceful again. Scientists went back to studying space instead of watching it nervously. New satellites were launched and television channels filled with documentaries about the era of peace. The world wanted to move on, but not everyone did. Some scientists, mostly quiet and ignored, noticed strange patterns in their data. Satellites near Jupiter caught faint flashes, like echoes of battles happening in the dark. Energy readings didn't make sense. Signals kept bouncing between deep space and somewhere beyond the moon. But when these scientists tried to warn the authorities, they were told not to create panic. People need peace, the officials said. Let the universe fight its own wars. In a small observatory in northern Chile, a researcher named Ayan sat through endless nights watching the stars. He had seen something months ago, a flash that lasted less than a second yet bright enough to turn night into day for a heartbeat. It wasn't a meteor nor any kind of natural flare. He had submitted his findings 3 times, and each time the same message came back: classified. That word felt heavier than the data itself. It meant someone knew more than they were admitting. Meanwhile, life on Earth continued as if nothing was wrong. Children played outside, unaware that far above them, invisible things moved through the void. Farmers tilled their land, soldiers retired, and nations focused on rebuilding economies instead of armies. Humanity had built comfort on top of silence. No one asked what the silence was hiding. Then small things began to happen. A few pilots reported seeing flashes above the Pacific Ocean, pale lights that blinked and vanished without radar detection. The media called them sky ghosts, and social media turned them into jokes. Memes flooded the internet showing alien ships stuck in Earth's traffic jams or hiding behind clouds. People laughed. But somewhere high above the clouds, the real watchers didn't laugh at all. Within a month, strange power fluctuations started affecting satellites. At first, it was brushed off as solar activity. Then communication between space stations began cutting out for seconds at a time. Those seconds turned into minutes. And one day, a research satellite orbiting near Mars sent back something it wasn't supposed to. Footage of a massive drifting object shaped like a scarred blade. It was silent, unmoving, and clearly not human-made. When the data reached Earth, it caused quiet panic behind closed doors. The leaders didn't announce it publicly. They met in underground facilities far from the ears of the public, far from the journalists who still believed peace ruled the sky. For hours, they watched the footage, the wreckage of an alien warship, marked with glowing symbols that looked like burns across its metal surface. That was the same symbol recorded years ago. During the near-war incident, the emblem of a species that had promised never to return near Earth's orbit again. If this ship was here, something had gone terribly wrong in space. The first argument among world leaders wasn't how to respond, but whether to tell the truth. "We cannot alarm people," one said. "The world has just begun to heal. We'll handle this quietly." And so once again, Earth looked away. Weeks passed. The wrecked alien vessel drifted silently between orbits, then vanished from radar. No one could find it again. Some believed it had burned up in the atmosphere, but others suspected something else, that it hadn't been a wreck at all, only pretending to be. Meanwhile, the flashes above the ocean became more frequent. Commercial flights began reporting malfunctions mid-air. Entire sections of sky went dark on satellite feeds. It was as if something or someone was jamming Earth's vision of the stars. Still, the people went about their lives. In a small town by the coast, a teacher gave her students a lesson about astronomy. She showed them pictures of planets and told them that the stars above were full of life. The children smiled, not knowing that some of that life might already be looking back. Late one evening, in an air traffic control center near Tokyo, a radar technician leaned closer to his screen. A cluster of objects had appeared out of nowhere, faint, cold, metallic. They moved too slowly to be meteors and too quickly to be satellites. He called his supervisor. Within minutes, military channels lit up. Yet before anyone could make sense of it, the objects faded, vanished like mist in sunlight. Around the world, similar reports surfaced, mysterious blips appearing and disappearing, as if something massive was cloaked just beyond reach. The scientists who had warned about this years ago were now silenced completely. Their labs were shut down. Some disappeared. Government said nothing publicly, but deep inside they knew the war humanity had avoided might not have ended. It had only shifted closer. Then came the first real sign. In the middle of the night, people across the Pacific coast saw a bright golden line cut through the stars. It wasn't a meteor. It moved too straight, too controlled. Cameras caught it for a few seconds before it vanished behind the clouds. The next morning, social media buzzed with theories: alien crafts, secret military tests, natural phenomena. The truth was stranger than all of them. The energy pattern from that streak matched the propulsion trails of alien fleets once recorded during the Great Encounter years ago. The same signature, the same technology. By the end of the week, the International Space Command ordered all orbital defense satellites into standby mode. That was the first time such a command had been issued since the treaty. It meant only one thing: someone was preparing for possible conflict. At the same time, the United Nations called an emergency meeting. Most of the world's leaders appeared tired, uncertain, and afraid. They argued for hours. Some demanded immediate action: activate defenses, alert the public, prepare the armies. Others warned that even a single hostile move could reignite an interstellar war. "We stayed neutral," one leader said. "We avoided their war. We did not attack anyone." Why would they return? No one could answer. Outside those walls, people still lived ordinary lives, unaware of the ticking clock above them. Cities glittered under night skies filled with stars. Stars that no longer looked as peaceful as they used to. Ayan, the astronomer who had once tried to warn the world, sat once again in his observatory. He looked at the horizon where the stars met the desert. His instruments had picked up something new, a low hum not from space but from within the atmosphere itself. The signal pulsed like a heartbeat, steady and growing stronger. It was as if the sky itself was breathing. He recorded it, compared it to old archives, and froze. The pattern was identical to communication frequencies used by the same alien species who once threatened Earth. They weren't fighting out there anymore. They were signaling from here. Somewhere in the darkness above, something massive had entered orbit. Quietly, patiently, waiting. The world still believed it had avoided the war. Government still promised peace. But those who were watching closely, the scientists, the soldiers, the few who still remembered the first encounter, knew the truth. The peace wasn't real. It was only a pause before the storm, and that storm was now drifting closer with every heartbeat of that strange signal. Earth had turned away from the battle once, thinking distance meant safety. Yet as the signal grew louder, the truth began to unfold like a slow dawn. This time the enemy wasn't coming for negotiation. They were coming home. Night after night the sky kept flashing. Small, silent sparks appeared and vanished so quickly that only pilots and stargazers noticed them. To most people, they looked like harmless shooting stars, but the few who watched closely could see the difference. These lights didn't fall, they hovered. The news tried to explain it. Some called them satellites reflecting sunlight. Others said they were space debris burning in the atmosphere. Everyone wanted an easy answer because the truth was harder to face. Peace felt fragile, like glass that could crack with one careless truth. Then the silence started to break. Over the Pacific Ocean, several long-range communication satellites stopped working within the same hour. The companies that owned them blamed solar storms, but the sun had been quiet for weeks. Engineers couldn't restart the systems. Even backup satellites began to lose power, one after another, as if something invisible was draining them. At first, only space agencies and governments knew what was happening. The public didn't notice. Internet connections slowed. GPS signals failed for short moments, but people blamed it on technology. Deep in control rooms, though, scientists were panicking. Something was moving across Earth's orbit, blocking signals in patterns that looked too deliberate to be random. The International Space Command sent out a small probe to investigate. It was named Horizon 9, built for long-distance observation. It left Earth silently, its cameras scanning the black space ahead. For days it sent back normal readings. Then suddenly its transmission turned into static. Hours later, a single image arrived before the signal died completely. It showed something massive, like a city floating in darkness. The object had sharp edges, long scars, and faint blue lines running across its surface. It wasn't built by human hands. In a secret meeting beneath Geneva, leaders and military officials gathered around a glowing screen showing that image. No one spoke for a while. The silence in the room was heavy, filled with a fear that no one wanted to admit. The ship in the picture wasn't drifting like debris. It was changing direction, slowly, deliberately, moving closer. A general leaned forward. "If this is what we think it is, the treaty is broken," he said quietly. No one disagreed. Yet once again, the order was the same. Keep it secret. They believed humanity wasn't ready for another panic. They thought maybe it was just a lost vessel, maybe damaged, maybe harmless. Hope can be a dangerous comfort. Days turned into weeks and the signs grew stronger. In coastal cities, strange sounds were recorded coming from the upper atmosphere, low metallic hums that lasted for seconds before fading. Birds began migrating early. Radio signals bent and echoed. People started sharing strange sky videos online, bright shapes above the ocean, glowing patterns that formed for moments and vanished. Most still laughed at them. The world had grown used to denying what it didn't understand. Then, late one evening, a commercial pilot flying from Sydney to Los Angeles sent an urgent transmission. His voice was calm but trembling. "Control, I'm seeing objects, multiple, moving above cloud level. Not planes, not meteors, they're reflecting light differently." His message cut out halfway through. Minutes later, radar screens across several control centers went blank. When they came back, dozens of unidentified signatures had appeared, moving across the Pacific toward the American coast. They weren't falling. They were gliding, just outside the edge of the atmosphere. The world's militaries switched to alert mode, though the public still knew nothing. Satellite operators tried to track the objects, but every time they locked on, their systems shut down. It was as if the sky itself was pushing them away. In a quiet research center, a scientist who had been tracking space signals for years finally cracked part of the code hidden in those transmissions. The objects were not random. They were communicating with each other in patterns. The message wasn't in any known language, but it repeated a single sequence again and again, like a warning or a countdown. He sent his findings to his superiors. Hours later, his access to the network was revoked. When he came to work the next day, his lab had been emptied. The only thing left was a sealed note on his desk. "Stand down." Meanwhile, rumors started spreading. News channels reported unidentified atmospheric anomalies. Amateur astronomers leaked footage showing lights forming triangular patterns in the sky. One video showed something even stranger: light beams hitting the ocean's surface, disappearing beneath the waves as if being absorbed. Then one morning, the world woke up to headlines they couldn't ignore. A massive explosion had occurred above the Atlantic Ocean. No ships were nearby, no missiles had been fired, yet satellites recorded a bright flash so large it could be seen from space. The official explanation was a meteor, but scientists noticed something odd. There was no impact crater, no debris, no trace of rock or metal. Only disturbed clouds and high radiation levels. Whatever happened there, it wasn't a meteor. People began to sense the truth. Something was wrong. Stock markets fell. Panic started spreading online, and governments scrambled to calm the public. They used the same line: "There is no danger. Do not believe the rumors." But people had seen the sky. They had heard the low hum that shook windows at night. Children pointed at glowing trails and asked questions their parents couldn't answer. In the middle of this fear, a small team of independent researchers launched a private drone into the upper atmosphere. What they captured shocked even them. The footage showed hundreds of metallic fragments floating above Earth's curve, forming a loose formation. They weren't falling, they were orbiting. Each piece glowed faintly, like sleeping eyes waiting to open. The researchers uploaded the footage anonymously. Within hours it went viral. The video spread faster than governments could remove it. By the time officials declared it fake, millions had already seen it. The truth was out. The lights weren't stars. They were ships. Panic rippled through cities. People rushed to stores, stocking food and fuel. The world was remembering old fears, the kind that came from knowing you were being watched. Air raid sirens that hadn't sounded in decades were tested again. Military bases across continents went silent. The internet filled with rumors of an invasion, though no one knew if it had already begun. Then one night, the skies over Europe flickered like a broken screen. A fleet of defense satellites turned on automatically, detecting incoming energy bursts. Within seconds, they shut down again. Engineers couldn't explain it. When they analyzed the readings, they found something terrifying. The energy waves weren't attacking Earth, they were scanning it, every city, every military base, every source of power. It was as if the visitors were mapping the planet. Meanwhile, out at sea, fishermen reported seeing huge shapes moving beneath the waves, glowing faintly before disappearing. Coastal radars picked up signals that made no sense, objects entering the water at impossible speeds, yet leaving no trace. One night, in a command bunker hidden under the desert, military leaders gathered around a live satellite feed. It showed a colossal ship emerging from the darkness, massive, scarred, and still carrying the same symbol seen on that drifting wreck weeks ago. It was now in Earth's lower orbit. The generals stared in silence. No one gave an order. Every country was waiting for someone else to act first. Fear held them still. For years, Earth had been proud of avoiding the alien wars. They had called it wisdom. But the truth was simpler. They had hidden, hoping to be forgotten. And now it seemed the galaxy had remembered. Hours later, strange weather began across the world. The northern lights appeared far beyond the poles, turning skies red and violet. Magnetic storms disrupted power grids, and auroras danced over cities that had never seen them before. It looked beautiful, but it wasn't nature. Those colors came from the alien engines as they adjusted their orbit, wrapping the planet in their field. In living rooms, families watched the skies glow through their windows, holding their breath, unsure whether they were witnessing the start of a miracle or the beginning of something far worse. Above them, the alien fleet hung silent and motionless. No weapons fired, no messages sent. Just stillness. It was as if the visitors were staring down, waiting for a reaction. For one night, the entire world stood united in fear. Every border, every nation, every person shared the same thought: what happens now? Some believed this was only a warning, a show of power meant to remind Earth of its past promises. Others whispered that it was something else, something darker, that the aliens who once fought far away had lost their own worlds, and now they were coming to take a new one. Whatever the reason, Earth could no longer pretend. The shadows in the sky were real, and they were not leaving. The war that humanity had avoided for so long was moving closer again, not with explosions or fire, but with quiet purpose, the kind of silence that comes before thunder. And somewhere among the stars that once promised peace, the enemy that Earth thought it had escaped was preparing to return, bringing the war home. The world didn't end in a single moment. It began to fall apart quietly. At first, there was only confusion. Governments called it a technical disruption, but everyone knew that wasn't true. The lights in the sky had stopped moving. They were now fixed above the planet like silent watchers. Air traffic control centers started losing communication with planes. Ships in the ocean reported compass failures and strange interference. Power grids flickered, then failed without warning. The sky above the Pacific turned a pale blue, glowing faintly even at night. Scientists said it wasn't the atmosphere, it was something else. Something massive hovering above, bending the light itself. And then one morning the world woke up to silence. No internet. No television, no radio. For the first time in decades, Earth was completely disconnected. In a small coastal city, people stepped out of their homes and pointed toward the horizon. There, far above the clouds, something shimmered like a curtain of light stretching across the sky. Some said it looked beautiful. Others said it felt wrong, like the air itself had changed. Military jets were scrambled to investigate. They disappeared from radar within minutes. No wreckage was found, no distress calls received. The governments denied everything, but by nightfall, every person on Earth could see the truth with their own eyes. A huge shadow moved across the moon. It wasn't an eclipse. It was the alien fleet. For years, Earth had believed it was safe, hidden away from the galaxy's wars. Now that lie burned away under the glow of those ships. They weren't drifting anymore. They were forming a formation, circling the planet slowly, precisely. People around the world watched in disbelief. Some prayed, some cried, others stood frozen, unable to accept what they were seeing. The news anchors tried to stay calm, reading from scripts written by terrified officials. Remain indoors, stay calm. This is not an invasion. But fear has its own language and no government can silence it. Then came the first strike. It started in the middle of the night. A single line of light tore through the darkness, striking an orbital defense satellite. There was no explosion, no fire, just silence followed by a flicker in the sky as the satellite vanished. Within minutes, 5 more disappeared the same way. The military scrambled again. Fighter jets launched from air bases across continents, streaking toward the strange lights. People gathered on rooftops to watch, recording the sky with shaky hands. For a moment, it looked like humanity was ready to fight back. But the fight never truly began. The jets never made it close. They vanished mid-air, swallowed by a flash too bright to look at. There was no sound, no smoke, just empty sky. It was as if the air itself had erased them. Panic spread fast. Sirens wailed across cities. People ran to shelters, though no one knew what they were hiding from. Parents clutched their children, whispering words of comfort they didn't believe themselves. Meanwhile, in a hidden underground command center, military leaders watched the chaos unfold on massive screens. Every communication system was jammed. Satellites blinked out one by one. The global defense network, something built over decades, was collapsing in minutes. "We're blind," a voice said. "Completely blind." Then on one of the surviving monitors, they saw it, an alien ship descending through the atmosphere. It wasn't like anything humans had ever built. The vessel was dark and smooth, surrounded by a glowing field that rippled like water. It moved slowly, silently, lowering itself above the Atlantic Ocean. For a moment, the ocean itself seemed to freeze. Then a massive wave rose and fell, followed by a pulse of light that spread across the water like lightning. Within seconds, every ship and submarine in that area lost power. It wasn't an attack. It was a message. The aliens weren't here to talk. They were showing their control. In the following hours, similar events happened across the world. Massive ships hovered over key regions above cities, oceans, and mountain ranges. Their presence was silent but terrifying. The air beneath them vibrated softly and no one could approach. Whenever human aircraft tried, they simply vanished. People hid indoors, staring at their darkened phones, waiting for any kind of instruction. But no one had answers. Governments were cut off from one another. The once connected world had gone dark. In a small underground base, a group of scientists and engineers worked by candlelight. Among them was an older man who had once warned about this very day. He had studied alien signals years ago during the first encounter, and now he recognized them again. The frequencies coming from the alien fleet weren't random. They were scanning for something. "Not a resource," he whispered, staring at his flickering monitor. "They're looking for someone." No one understood what he meant. But he had a theory, that the aliens weren't just attacking Earth for revenge or conquest. They were searching for a lost fleet, the same one Earth's satellites had seen drifting weeks ago. That fleet had once been part of their war, and something on Earth had drawn it here. Outside, the skies turned darker. Thunder rolled even without clouds. The alien ships emitted low vibrations that made the ground tremble softly. Windows shattered from the resonance alone. The world felt alive and tense, like the planet itself was holding its breath. Then came the first explosion on Earth. It happened over a coastal military base. Witnesses said the sky opened in a flash of white light. The base vanished instantly, leaving nothing but dust and a crater. No sound reached the nearby towns for several seconds, as if the air itself refused to carry the noise. The news spread fast, even without the internet. Fear traveled faster than signal. People started leaving cities, clogging highways with cars that barely moved. Airports overflowed, but flights were grounded. Panic became a storm no one could control. The alien fleet didn't fire again that night. It didn't need to. The message was clear. Earth's defenses meant nothing. By the second day, world leaders finally addressed the public through emergency radio channels. Their voices cracked as they promised safety. But no one believed them anymore. Some countries declared martial law, others simply went silent. In the middle of all this chaos, there were still acts of courage. Firefighters pulled survivors from collapsed buildings, doctors worked without rest, and soldiers stood guard even when they knew they couldn't fight what was coming. Humanity's spirit refused to die, even as the sky above looked hopeless. Then, on the third day, something unexpected happened. A small group of scientists managed to restore a communication link between Earth and one of the disabled satellites. For a few seconds, they received a signal from space, an alien transmission translated into a pattern of simple tones. It wasn't a threat. It was a warning. The message repeated a single phrase again and again. They are coming. The scientists didn't understand who they were. The fleet above was already here. Did it mean there was another force behind them? Another war spilling toward Earth? No one had time to find out. Hours later, multiple bright objects appeared beyond the fleet, fast-moving, burning with orange trails. They weren't from Earth. They were alien too, but different in shape and speed. A battle broke out in the upper atmosphere. From the ground, it looked like fireworks. Beautiful, silent bursts of light dancing among the stars. For the first time, humans realized something incredible. The invaders weren't all united. They were fighting each other above Earth's sky. That gave humanity one fragile hope. If they were fighting each other, maybe, just maybe, Earth had a chance to survive between them. But even as people watched those silent explosions far above, no one felt safe. The sky had become a battlefield again, and Earth was trapped right in the middle. In a darkened bunker, the old scientist whispered to himself, "We avoided their war once. We thought peace would protect us. But peace doesn't stop war. It only delays it." Outside, the night glowed with strange light. The sound of the distant sky battles rumbled faintly like a heartbeat across the world. The first strike had come. And it was only the beginning. The world had gone quiet again, but it wasn't peace this time, it was fear. The alien fleet still hovered above, half hidden by clouds, their dark shapes glowing faintly like embers in the night sky. The first strike had left cities in ruins, communications broken, and hope slipping through everyone's fingers. Days passed with no sign of movement from the alien ships. It felt like they were waiting for something. The silence stretched endlessly, and that silence became heavier than noise. People began to whisper. Maybe the worst was over, maybe they had only come to warn, not destroy. But deep down, everyone knew better. In underground shelters and broken cities, small groups of people started coming together. Soldiers, engineers, scientists, even farmers and teachers. Anyone who could help rebuild, fight, or simply survive. They didn't wait for orders anymore. Governments had gone silent. The world was now running on instinct. Somewhere beneath the deserts, inside an old bunker once used for research, a small group of survivors gathered around a flickering map. They weren't soldiers, at least not anymore. They were ordinary people forced into something extraordinary. Their supplies were limited, but their will was not. They decided to call themselves the Resistance. Their goal was simple: survive. Learn and fight back when the time came. One of the engineers among them, an older man with tired eyes, had once worked on communication systems for space defense. He remembered a project that was shut down after the peace treaty years ago. It involved studying alien signals and trying to understand their technology. He still had copies of those old files, blueprints and code fragments that the government had buried long ago. He shared them with the group. At first, it was nothing but a puzzle of strange numbers and unreadable symbols. But hidden inside those patterns, the team discovered something unusual, a repeating signal like a heartbeat. It wasn't from the alien fleet above. It was coming from somewhere on Earth. That discovery changed everything. It meant that the aliens had planted something on the planet long ago, maybe during their first contact years back. Something that was now awake. The Resistance split into small teams, each with its mission. Some searched through old military bases for working equipment, others scavenged for fuel and food, and a few dedicated themselves to decoding that mysterious signal. They lived in the shadows, moving carefully between destroyed cities and empty roads, avoiding the drones that now patrolled the sky. The drones were unlike anything human-made. Silent, silver spheres that moved slowly through the air, scanning the ground with beams of light. They didn't always attack, but when they did, they left nothing behind. The resistance learned to hide underground whenever they appeared. In one ruined city, a group of young technicians managed to power up an old radio tower. They worked through the night, connecting wires, testing signals, hoping to reach anyone still alive out there. When the system finally came online, the tower crackled to life and a voice answered back. It was faint but human. There were others. Across continents, small groups were rising, pockets of resistance in every corner of the world. Some were scientists, some were soldiers, and some were simply people who refused to give up. Slowly, humanity began to connect again, not through technology, but through courage. The older engineer sent them the strange alien signal pattern. He believed it could be the key to understanding how the invaders communicated, or even controlled their weapons. The message spread from bunker to bunker, carried by people on foot, by makeshift radios, even by handwritten notes passed between camps. In one of those camps, a group of scientists found something extraordinary. Using pieces of fallen alien drones, they managed to create a small device that could mimic the alien frequency. It wasn't powerful, but it could interfere with the drones' sensors for a few seconds. For the first time since the invasion began, humans had found a weakness. Those few seconds became a weapon. The resistance used the device to ambush small alien patrols. They captured fragments of alien technology, parts that glowed faintly with unknown energy. Every piece brought new knowledge, and with each discovery, they began to understand how the enemy worked. Still, fear remained their constant companion. Every night the sky pulsed with faint blue light, reminding them that the fleet was still watching. Sometimes the ships moved slightly, releasing thunderous sounds that rolled across continents like distant storms. Each movement made the ground tremble and hearts stop. Yet despite the fear, humanity was changing. People who had never held a weapon before now guarded the weak. Farmers learned to repair machines. Scientists learned to survive in the wild. For the first time in history, humans were united not by borders or flags, but by one shared goal: to survive together. Months passed. The resistance had grown stronger, more organized. They had outposts across several continents, hidden in caves, tunnels, and old military sites. They built small laboratories powered by scavenged generators. There were no governments anymore, no presidents or kings, only people working side by side. Then one night, everything changed. A transmission was received on one of the radio towers. It wasn't from the alien fleet. It was from deep space. The signal matched the same code pattern as the mysterious heartbeat they had found earlier. It was weak but steady, repeating a series of numbers that translated into coordinates. Those coordinates pointed to a location near the North Pole. The leaders of the resistance met secretly to decide what to do. The message could be a trap, but it could also be a key, something the aliens had left behind or something another civilization had sent. After days of debate, they decided to send a small team to investigate. The journey was dangerous. The skies were still under alien control and the land was scarred by old battles. The team traveled by night, crossing frozen landscapes and abandoned outposts. They moved carefully, using the alien frequency disruptor to hide from drones. When they finally reached the coordinates, they found something buried under the ice, a metallic structure glowing faintly through the frost. It was ancient, covered in symbols similar to those on the alien ships, but it looked damaged, almost forgotten. They cleared the ice and activated their scanners. Inside the structure, a soft hum echoed, growing louder as they got closer. A door opened automatically, revealing a chamber filled with faint light. In the center was a small core pulsing gently. The readings showed something shocking. It was not a weapon. It was a beacon. That beacon was sending a distress signal into space. The same signal that had drawn the alien fleet to Earth in the first place. The team quickly realized what it meant. The first alien war, the one Earth had tried to avoid, had left survivors, and those survivors had hidden this beacon on Earth long ago. Now that it was active again, it had called the war back. They had to shut it down. Working carefully, they began to disconnect the power source. The core resisted, glowing brighter as if it sensed what they were doing. The whole structure started to shake. They managed to pull out the main energy cell, and with a blinding flash, the beacon went silent. At that exact moment, across the world, the alien fleet reacted. The ships in the sky shifted suddenly, their lights flickering wildly. The silence that had lasted for months broke with a thunderous roar that shook the ground. The aliens knew what humanity had done. The team barely escaped before the ice around them cracked and exploded. As they ran, they looked up at the night sky. The ships above were moving, fast and angry. Back at the resistance base, the older engineer listened to the radio feed and whispered, "They've found us." Across the planet, the alien fleet began to descend. Their engines lit the sky like fire. The war that Earth had tried so hard to avoid was no longer coming. It was already here. Yet something was different this time. Humanity wasn't helpless anymore. They had knowledge, courage, and unity. They had learned to fight not with fear, but with purpose. In every bunker and camp, people grabbed their tools, weapons, and whatever hope they had left. The time for hiding was over. The resistance was ready. And as the alien ships broke through the clouds, glowing brighter than lightning, humanity stood together, not as nations, but as one world. The second battle for Earth was about to begin. The air was no longer calm. The sky that once held silence now burned red as the alien fleet descended through the clouds. Their ships looked like floating mountains made of fire and steel, spreading shadows across cities that were once full of life. The deep rumble of their engines shook the ground, and people everywhere felt the same cold fear rise inside them. Yet this time, Earth was not the same. In every corner of the world, the resistance was ready. People who once hid underground now came out into the open, their faces dusty, their eyes glowing with determination. They had built weapons out of scraps, shields from wreckage, and hope from nothing. They didn't have the technology of the invaders, but they had something stronger, a reason to fight. The older engineer stood near a cracked window in the underground base, watching as the first lights of the alien assault flashed across the horizon. He had lived through wars before, but nothing like this. The difference now was that humans weren't just fighting to win. They were fighting to survive as a species. He turned toward the others and said quietly, "It's time." Across the planet, small resistance groups began to move. They had planned for this day for months. Using their signal disruptors, they created interference waves that confused the alien drones, causing some to crash or lose connection. It wasn't enough to stop the invasion, but it slowed them down, and that was all humanity needed for now. In the ruins of an old city, a team of resistance fighters hid inside what used to be a subway station. The tunnels stretched deep underground, offering some protection. They had turned it into a small command center with radio systems, maps, and supplies. When the attack began, the whole place shook like an earthquake. Dust fell from the ceiling as distant explosions echoed. Someone turned on the radio. Voices from other groups came through, a mix of fear and courage. "Sector 4 holding steady. We took down 3 drones. Need backup near the river. We've got civilians trapped. Power grid offline. Switching to manual control." The chaos was everywhere, but so was the will to fight. The aliens attacked with precision. They didn't fire randomly. They struck power plants, communication hubs, and water systems, everything that kept humans connected. They wanted to break Earth from the inside. Yet the resistance had prepared for that too. They had built secret tunnels linking bases together, using old maps and hidden routes from before the war. In one such base, a small group of scientists worked on something new. They had been studying the alien energy core recovered from the beacon site. It contained a strange pulsing light that responded to certain frequencies of sound. After weeks of study, they discovered that the energy could be redirected, even repelled, using precise sound waves. That meant they could possibly create a weapon, something to push back the alien energy shields. It wasn't a perfect plan, but it was a chance. They called it Project Echo. Using large speakers and modified radio transmitters, they aimed to broadcast a frequency strong enough to weaken the alien shields for a short time. It was risky, and if it failed, it could expose their location. But as the invasion spread, there was no other choice. The team worked day and night, running tests in secret. Every small success felt like a miracle. Every failure a reminder of how close the enemy was. Outside, alien ships moved through the clouds like thunderheads. The glow from their weapons painted the night sky in terrifying shades of blue and white. Then came the first real counterattack. In a coastal city where the resistance had managed to regroup, Hundreds of fighters lined up behind walls of sandbags and burned vehicles. The ocean roared behind them, the waves crashing as alien ships hovered above the water. The people on the ground had no fear left, only determination. When the first blast came from the sky, they fired back with everything they had. Rockets made from old fuel tanks, bullets forged in hidden factories, and even old anti-air weapons from past wars. Smoke filled the air, and the ground trembled under their feet. It wasn't an even fight, but it was a message. The people of Earth were not giving up. For the first time, one of the alien ships took real damage. It stumbled in the air, its engines flickering before crashing into the sea. The sound of that crash echoed across the coast, followed by a cheer so loud it shook hearts more than the explosions. That moment became a symbol. Across the world, the resistance heard about the victory and their spirits lifted. Even though the aliens were far more powerful, that one small win reminded humanity that nothing was impossible. Meanwhile, the Project Echo team completed their final test. They prepared to activate the soundwave generator, built from pieces of alien tech and old satellite equipment. The older engineer sent out a signal to all resistance groups to be ready. The goal was simple: hit the alien fleet hard the moment their shields dropped. At sunrise, Project Echo began. Massive speakers hidden across mountain ranges and underground bunkers powered up. The sound they released wasn't something humans could hear. It was deep, beyond normal hearing. But it made the air itself vibrate. Birds scattered, clouds rippled, and even the alien ship seemed to pause mid-flight. Then it happened. Their shields flickered. The glowing armor that once made them untouchable began to fade. For a few seconds, they were exposed. The resistance saw their chance and attacked with everything they had. Missiles, explosives, energy disruptors all fired at once. One by one, alien ships burst into flames and fell from the sky. The sight was unbelievable. People came out from shelters just to see it, the sky once filled with death, now lit up with fire and hope. But the aliens weren't finished in response. They released something new, a weapon that darkened the clouds and sent waves of energy across the land. Machines shut down, radios went silent, and even the Project Echo system began to overload. The sound wave generators sparked and exploded one after another. The resistance lost contact with several regions. It felt like everything they had built was collapsing again. Still, not everyone gave up. The older engineer, sitting in a dark room filled with smoke and broken machines, realized something important. The alien weapon wasn't just destroying, it was feeding on energy. That meant it could also be starved. If they could cut off its power source, the weapon would fail. He quickly gathered his team and started searching for the source. Using satellite readings from before the blackout, they traced the energy pattern to a massive alien structure floating above the Atlantic Ocean. It was larger than any ship they had seen before, a fortress that looked like it was made of black glass and lightning. It was their command ship, the heart of the invasion. Destroying it would end the attack, but reaching it was almost impossible. The engineer knew it, yet he also knew they had no choice. He sent one final message across the resistance radio network. If this is the end, then let it be the end we choose. Across the world, people stopped running. They looked at the sky with fire in their eyes. It didn't matter anymore how big the enemy was. They had already lost too much to turn back now. Planes that were once grounded took flight again, patched together by mechanics who had never given up. Old naval ships powered up from ports. Fighters on the ground prepared to strike. This was no longer a war for survival. It was humanity's answer to extinction. As the day broke and the sun rose behind the smoke, thousands of people across the world looked up and saw the alien fortress shining in the sky. The battle to save Earth had entered its final stage. They were tired, hurt, and outnumbered. Yet their spirits burned brighter than ever. The engineer whispered to himself as he looked at the rising light. We ran once, but not anymore. The world that had once avoided war was now united in it. And though the outcome was uncertain, one truth remained clear. Humanity had found its strength in the darkest hour. The real fight was just beginning. The sky was burning again, but this time Earth was not running. The alien fortress above the Atlantic looked like a giant storm frozen in midair, black, glowing, and alive. It pulsed with strange blue light, sending energy waves that rippled through the atmosphere. Each pulse made the oceans tremble and the air buzz like electricity. Across the planet, People stared up from rooftops, deserts, forests, and shelters. Everyone knew this was it, the final battle. There would be no tomorrow if this failed. The Resistance had one goal now: destroy the command ship and end the war once and for all. In the underground control center, the older engineer stood in front of a cracked screen showing the fortress. His hands shook slightly, not from fear, but from exhaustion. He had barely slept in days. Around him, people moved quickly, checking signals, coordinating strikes, repairing damaged transmitters. The whole world was awake. "Everything we have left," he said quietly. "We throw it now." Across continents, the order spread. Fighter jets rose into the air. Old warships moved out to sea, and homemade rockets rolled through city streets. Farmers, teachers, and mechanics stood beside soldiers. It didn't matter who they were before. All that mattered was what they stood for now. Above them, the alien fortress began to open. Massive panels slid apart, revealing bright cores of energy deep inside. A sound like thunder rolled across the sky. The aliens were preparing to fire something powerful, something that could destroy entire regions at once. The countdown to the end had begun. The Resistance launched their attack. Dozens of planes flew low over the ocean, dodging blue plasma beams that tore through the clouds. Old submarines, restored from scrapyards, fired torpedoes made from whatever technology they could find. Rockets flew from land, streaking toward the fortress in fiery arcs. The sky became a storm of fire. Many of the human weapons never reached their target. Alien shields absorbed most of the impact. Yet the Resistance kept firing, wave after wave, because every hit mattered. Every second they kept the enemy busy meant someone else could move closer. Among the chaos, one special aircraft flew higher than the rest. It carried the remains of Project Echo, rebuilt with new power cells. The goal was to reach close enough to the fortress to activate the sound frequency that once weakened the alien shields. It was their last hope. Inside that plane, the crew worked in silence. They knew the risks. The closer they got, the more their instruments shook. Energy waves scrambled their systems and metal panels rattled under pressure. Still, they pushed forward. The sky around them glowed bright as lightning struck in every direction, but they didn't turn back. On the ground, the engineer listened through static-filled radio signals. His heart pounded as he waited for confirmation. The sound frequency had to be triggered at the right moment or the entire mission would fail. Minutes felt like hours. The alien fortress was now charging for a massive strike. Blue light gathered at its core, ready to unleash devastation. Then the radio came alive. "We're in position," a voice said through the static. "Activating now." The world seemed to hold its breath. A deep vibration spread through the air. The clouds rippled again and the glow around the alien ships began to shimmer. Their shields flickered just like before, only this time the signal was stronger, sharper, and perfectly timed. All around the world, Resistance teams fired everything they had left. Missiles tore through the sky. Explosions bloomed across the fortress and waves of flame rose from the ocean. One section of the fortress broke apart, sending burning metal into the sea below. For the first time, the alien fortress screamed, a sound that wasn't mechanical but alive, as if it felt pain. The blue lights dimmed and cracks spread across its surface. The Resistance cheered, but the celebration didn't last long. The fortress reacted violently. It released a shock wave that destroyed several aircraft instantly, and the Project Echo plane took heavy damage. The crew struggled to stay in the air, smoke filling the cabin. "We can't hold much longer," one shouted over the radio. The engineer gritted his teeth. "Hold it just a little more. You're almost there." Flames spread through the plane, but they didn't stop. They kept transmitting the sound frequency, forcing the alien shields to collapse piece by piece. The sky was now full of falling ships, alien drones crashing into the sea and broken fighters tumbling from the clouds. Down below, the engineer saw something on his screen, a weak point forming near the core of the fortress. A massive crack glowing white-hot. It was the center of their energy network. He grabbed the radio and shouted, "All units, target the core. Everything on that point." All over the planet, the order went out. Missiles from land bases, torpedoes from the ocean, and even drones hacked from fallen alien tech turned toward the same target. The combined strike hit the fortress at once, creating an explosion so bright it lit up half the sky. For a moment, the light was blinding. The ground shook like the world itself was breaking apart. Then the sound came, a deep echoing roar that rolled across continents. When the light faded, the fortress was falling. Huge chunks of metal rained into the ocean, sending waves miles high. The sky was filled with smoke and fire. The blue glow that once covered the alien fleet was gone. The ships that remained in the air started to break apart, one after another, until only silence was left. The war was over. The older engineer sank into his chair, his eyes full of tears he hadn't allowed himself to shed for months. Around him, people hugged, laughed, and cried. Some fell to their knees, too shocked to move. For the first time in a long while, they heard something that had almost been forgotten, the sound of the wind without sirens or explosions. Across the world, survivors came out of shelters. Children looked up at the sky and saw sunlight breaking through the smoke. The sea, though still wild, was slowly calming. Birds began to return to the cities, flying through broken windows and over ruined streets. Humanity had done the impossible. Days passed. The fires burned out and the survivors began to rebuild. They found each other through broken radios and handwritten messages. Old borders didn't matter anymore. The war had erased them. People helped strangers like family because everyone had lost something, and that made them the same. The engineer spent his days repairing communication towers, trying to restore a global signal. One afternoon, while he was working near the coast, he found a small piece of metal washed ashore. It was part of the alien fortress, but something about it glowed softly, almost peacefully. He picked it up and realized the energy inside wasn't gone. It had changed. It no longer pulsed with cold blue light. It shimmered with a faint golden hue, warm and quiet, like it had been cleansed. He smiled. Maybe not all of their technology was evil. Maybe, just maybe, something good could come from what was left behind. Humanity would study it carefully, not to create new weapons, but to understand, to learn, to grow, and to protect. In time, Earth began to heal. Cities were rebuilt, rivers ran clean again, and people started planting trees where craters once lay. Life, stubborn and beautiful, returned. The sky that had once burned now shone with stars. Yet the memory of the war never faded. It became a story passed down from one generation to another, a story not about destruction but about unity. About how the people of Earth once stood together when everything seemed lost. The older engineer often sat near the shore in the evenings, looking at the sunset. The world was different now, quieter, wiser. He thought about the friends who didn't make it, the sacrifices made and the lessons learned. He knew that the peace they now had wasn't given. It was earned. As the waves touched his feet, he whispered softly, "We avoided the battle once, but when it came back, we faced it together. That's what saved us." The horizon glowed gold as the sun sank into the sea. Somewhere far above, the stars began to appear again, silent witnesses of a world that had almost ended, but didn't, because humanity had found its courage not in weapons or power, but in the strength to stand together, and that, more than anything, was their greatest victory.